Okay, welcome, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at 5:01 for May 14th, 2024. This meeting will be held in a hybrid manner where members of council, staff, and the public can participate electronically. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available on the township website. Notice is hereby provided that under the authority of the Municipal Act 2001 and in accordance with Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, that all information attained is considered part of the public record. All rules apply to the meeting as if everyone is attending in person, and if there is a problem with the technology impacting the proceedings of the meeting may be recessed. So at this time, we will rise for the playing of the national anthem. We acknowledge that we are being hosted on ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Mississauga, and Omama people. We acknowledge and welcome the presence of all Indigenous people, including the Métis, Inuit, and other First Nations from across this vast land, who also make this place home. The lands we are on today are recognized in the Two-Row Wampum, Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 27, and the Crawford Purchase. First item up is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a mover, Deputy Mayor?
I move that the agenda of the May 14th, 2024 meeting of council be adopted as circulated.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Parks. Sorry. There were no errors or omissions, is that correct? Okay, so with that, call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Are there any declarations this evening? Seeing none, we have a motion to go into closed session. Did someone like to pass that motion? Sorry.
Through your worship, if I could just ask for an amendment to the motion that's on the agenda, and I'll share my screen.
Okay.
Your worship and council, I'm asking for a small amendment to the motion that's presented on the agenda to add the second clause about personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal and local board employees verbal update on staffing and positions in the finance department.
Okay, thank you. So, council, do we have a mover to go into closed? Councillor Prodrick, do you mind just reading the screen? Can you see that screen?
Oh, okay, I can actually. I move that council now move into closed session to consider proposed or pending acquisition and disposition of land. Request to lease a portion of land owned by the township and there's about an identified individual, including municipal or local board employees, verbal update on staffing and positions in the finance department pursuant to section 239C and B of the municipal act.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Willis, all in favor, please raise a hand. Motion is passed. We are going into closed. Welcome, everyone. We'll reconvene the meeting at 6 PM. We started the meeting at 5 and we were in closed session for an hour. And we would rise and report that council went into closed session to direct staff regarding a lease agreement and receiving verbal report on staff in the finance department. With that, we will go to presentations. And the first presentation, I'll turn over to the CIO. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased today to present to you Dr. Adi Dotan Aladi. Who would like to come up? Thank you. Dr. Aladi is the first physician as part of the council's new physician recruitment incentive program. He has taken over the practice of Dr. Laura McKinnon, who retired from the Loyalist Family Health Team in February, and he's taken over her practice. Dr. Lade is a distinguished medical professional whose journey began at the University of Ibadan College of Medicine in Nigeria, where he graduated as one of the best graduating students in his set. After completing his undergraduate studies, he pursued postgraduate training in family medicine in England, UK, further specializing in musculoskeletal medicine and obtaining relevant diplomas. Dr. Lade is a proud member of prestigious medical institutions such as the Royal College of General Practitioners and the Canadian College of Family Physicians. Beyond his professional achievements, he finds joy in his loving marriage and two beautiful daughters. Dr. Lade's legacy is one of dedication, compassion, and impact in the field of medicine, serving as an inspiration to others. We wish to welcome him to Loyalist Family Health Team here. We are also working staff are continuing to work as well to recruit other physicians under Council's Physician Recruitment Incentive Program, and hope to have good news about that in the coming months as well.
Good evening, Your Worship. Good evening, councillors, staff, members of the public. Thank you for taking the time this evening to acknowledge the contributions of the Lennox and Addington OPP Auxiliary Unit. This is a group of dedicated volunteers who work with regular service OPP officers to ensure safety and well-being for those communities we serve. These men and women from your community volunteer their own time to make a difference for us all. Most impressive, and why we pause to acknowledge them this evening, is they have their own careers, their own families, their own personal interests. Despite this, they don't only find time, but they make time because they are drawn by a passion and desire to serve and contribute to their community. We also thank their families of our volunteer auxiliary members for their ongoing support and appreciation of the work of this program. Through their support, they also demonstrate a commitment to the well-being of our community. The mission of the OPP Auxiliary Unit is to provide fully trained auxiliary members to assist in the delivery of traffic and community-based safety and crime preventive initiatives. Tonight, you will hear from this team that they are required to volunteer 1,344 hours in 2023 based on the complement of auxiliary members we had in this team. This team exceeded that number by volunteering 4,140 hours to Lennox and Addington. 1,900 or 46% of those hours were contributed and volunteered within this community of Loyalist Township. A truly remarkable and selfless community contributions from these individuals. At this time, I'd like to turn the stage over to our auxiliary team, Auxiliary Staff Sergeant Josh Belanger, who will introduce our team and speak to some of the volunteer work that they have performed in this community over the last year. So Josh, I'll turn over to you. And I'm going to kind of step back and I'm going to ask the rest of the team to maybe come forward and let them own the stage and receive the great acknowledgement that they certainly deserve.
Thank you, Inspector. Good evening. My name is Auxiliary Staff Sergeant Joshua Belanger. I've been with the OPP this is my 19th, 20th year now. Joined in 2004. It's a pleasure to serve my community and the residents of Ontario. To my left here, Auxiliary Sergeant Peter Hamilton, Auxiliary Sergeant Joe Tisdale, Auxiliary Constable James Elliott, Auxiliary Sergeant Tammy Woodburn, Auxiliary Constable Ken Rundle. The Ontario Provincial Police Auxiliary is a group of dedicated volunteers who work with regular force OPP officers to ensure safety and the well-being in the province of Ontario. Our mission statement is to provide fully trained auxiliary members to assist in the delivery of traffic safety and community-based crime prevention initiatives, and to perform police duties only in circumstances, including an emergency, that the police officers of the OPP are insignificant, not sufficient numerous to deal with. Excuse me. The OPP auxiliary commitment. This is a volunteer position and is unpaid. All applicants must successfully complete an 8-day auxiliary recruit training course in Orillia. As an auxiliary member, you must commit to 10 hours of patrol and 6 hours of training per month as a minimum, with an annual expectation of 192 hours per member. The 8 members of the LNA Auxiliary OPP completed approximately 1,900 hours of service in Loyalist Township in 2023. These are some of the events that we participated in Loyalist Township: the Family Fishing Day, Odessa Fair, Classroom to Community, Back to the Farm Ride, Trunk or Treat, Amherst View Christmas Parade, Remembrance Day, Amherst View Light Up the Season, Mary Main Street on Bath, Lock or Lose It Patrol in Amherst View, Vehicle and Marine Patrol with regular OPP officers, and Festive Ride. These are some of the pictures of our members at these community events. These ones here are from the Lock or Lose It as a crime prevention initiative. We try and patrol communities and ensure that vehicles are secure and that valuables are kept at a site in an effort to prevent any theft. These next series of photos are from the marine events. Continuing on to others various events. These ones here, the Trunk or Treat event. It was very successful with the community. We had many members of the public come up and interact with our members that were on at the event. And this continues on with some of our festive ride and members of our unit, and appreciation showing to our unit in the bottom unit picture. And of course, we do numerous food drives in the community to support local food banks. We've always had tremendous success with those. Great. Thanks very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. I would just like to say thank you to all the auxiliary. I'm going to come down in just a moment and speak to each one of you. I just want to take this moment to acknowledge them and also to raise awareness on an item that would actually be able to help the auxiliary because they are a frontline force in collecting some information when there's incidents in the area. And the township has partnered with the OPP on CamSafe. And we encourage all of our residents to look into this, do some research, and hopefully sign up to CamSafe because when an incident happens, the recordings are invaluable and it makes the job so much easier for our forces when they go out to try and collect that data. So the quicker they can get the information and be able to know where to go and be able to gather it and make use of it, certainly helps expedite the investigations as well and may actually make their job just a little bit easier, which is a good thing too. So I'm going to come down and if I'd just ask that you come forward, I'm going to present. I would also like to just take a moment to acknowledge the police services that make the auxiliary possible. We've had two presenters here this evening, and it takes a lot of work for the police service to be able to maintain the auxiliary. We appreciate the auxiliary, what the auxiliary does. We also appreciate the support they get from their team. So thank you. Okay. No statutory meetings. The next is open forum. So 15 minutes of each meeting is being set aside for open forum. An individual may address council regarding an item on the agenda, excluding matters under the statutory public meeting section on the same agenda. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. Anyone wishing to speak should have registered in advance. And I will call for the virtual audience to use the raised hand feature in Zoom if they wish to speak. So we didn't have any previously. Do we have any that registered this evening?
Through you, your worship, I don't have anyone pre-registered to speak under open forum.
No one's pre-registered. So I will first open it up to the in chambers, and then I will go to the virtual audience. Is there anyone in chambers that wishes to bring an item forward for council's consideration or to information on an item that's within the agenda? Seeing none, I'll go to the virtual audience. I would ask that if you would use the raised hand feature, we can bring you into the meeting to address council this evening.
Through you, your worship, I don't see anyone with their hand raised in the virtual world.
Okay, so that completes the open forum. We will go to delegations. Bob Baker. There we go. If you wouldn't mind coming forward, just press the button so that the mic is on. Are you? No. It will light up red around the here, and there you go. It's on.
Perfect. Got the presentation. Great. Mayor, council, thank you for having me. My name's Bob Baker. I'm the executive director at the Community Foundation for Lennox and Addington, probably the best kept secret in LNA. We started out a number of years ago, 1987, in fact, as the Napanee District Community Foundation, and expanded our reach about 6 years ago. I joined the organization in September after I had retired, and now I'm semi-retired, living in Amherst View. So I'm, while we're a kind of a Napanee-centric organization, I'm working very hard to make sure we're an LNA-focused organization. And I really appreciate being here this evening just to tell you a little bit about our work, and hope that you'll be able to spread the word about the work that we're doing in the community to make it a better place for everyone. So I'll just brought a slide deck and just want to give you an outline of who we are and what we've done. We were founded in 1987. The Hogarth family started us off with a nice donation of $100,000 back in 1987 with the purpose of investing the funds to create an endowment in perpetuity to support causes like any charitable cause, and I'll get into that in a moment. We've since then, that time, we now have 41 funds under investment and are able to invest. In fact, we'll be investing about $160,000 this year in the community to needy causes as well as to student awards. In fact, I just came from a meeting of our grants committee where they made decisions on granting over 25 scholarships and student awards to LNA students and entering post-secondary education, college, university, and the trades. So we're really happy to be able to make a difference in the community with the work that we do. We've granted approximately $1.7 million since that time. And since 1987, we're volunteer driven. We're a very small organization. We have a board of directors of 12 who work in the community to help promote what we're trying to do. And you know, that really being largely focused on creating this forever fund for our community. So what the heck is it that we do? Well, we want to work in the community to inspire philanthropy. We want to be transformational. We want to make a difference so that folks in need, whether it's a healthcare need or we want to invest in sports and recreation, all kinds of charitable causes are what we support. We our mission is to really, and the words are up there, connecting, providing, and improving. We work to connect donors with charitable causes that they believe in. So think about it this way. We're not a one stop cause. If an individual, and it doesn't matter how much money folks have that they want to donate, if individuals want to donate funds to the hospital or to Morning Star Mission or to the gymnastics club, they can do that through us. And what's interesting with what we do is we're able to create a long-term endowment so that funds are paid out forever and ever to support that cause. We work with community groups to identify what the key needs are in the community, and we do our very best to respond to those needs. And as I said, we support everything. This slide shows you, I mean, every different type of charitable cause we support. And I think it's important, you know, to note that there's over 200 community foundations. I mentioned off the top, we're probably one of the best kept secrets. There's over 200 in Canada from various sizes. And we're one of the smaller ones with just about 4 million under investment. It sounds like a lot of money, but in the long term, we have significant needs in the community, and we're working very hard to make sure that we can address those needs. So how do we give out the money? So you know, we're here to try to match donors with, and we are a charitable organization ourselves, match donors with charities that they want to support. We support all different types of causes. The biggest question I get is, how do you give the money out? How does that work? Well, there's 4 different ways that we use our funds. We have our general community funds, and that's where charities in LNA apply to us every year for funding. And we work, we then do a call through their applications. We then review their applications. We have a granting committee that decides where those funds will be allocated. And we'll be issuing a news release very shortly, but what the heck, I'll tell you what, we're going to be issuing 90,000 in community grants this year. And we'll be announcing that later this month. We also have donor-directed funds. And this is where an individual or a family or a company or an organization, a community group can come to us and they can set up a fund and say, we want our funds to go to a specific charity. Now, why wouldn't they give directly to that charity? Well, that charity may not be in a position to manage an investment, and that's what our business is all about. We pool our funds and are able to issue anywhere from 4 to 5% per year because we actually pool our funds with the Toronto Community Foundation, and we get good returns so that we can have this funding going on in perpetuity. So that's what a donor-directed is specifically, where a donor says to us, well, I'd like to support the hospital through you, or I'd like to support Alzheimer's through you, or a sports and recreation. Field of interest is an interesting one. That's where the donor can make a choice to actually fund a general area of interest. We just recently secured a new fund, the Field Family Fund, and our donor has decided that he wants to have the funds go to either the environment or poverty reduction programs. So that's kind of an interesting situation. So they're not saying I wanted to go to this specific charity. I want to respond to the needs of the day, and those dollars will go there. And then finally, we have our emerging funds. In 2019, just before the blip happened that we all call the pandemic, we had community consultations where we identified 3 specific needs, and we feel that these are the key needs in LNA continuing today. And our emerging funds include health and well-being, no poverty, and environmental action. And in fact, we have 3 individual funds against each of these particular focus areas, and grant funds every year to charities that apply to us to get funding in those areas. Now, our board is going to be finalizing its strategic directions in the coming weeks, but I thought I'd take the opportunity to share with you what our focus is going to be for the next 3 to 4 years. I mentioned earlier that we've been around since 1987, and we've granted around $1.7, $1.8 million. And we give quite a bit of money to student awards as well as to community programs. what we want to do is we want to move the needle over the next 3 years where we're granting not $170,000, but $500,000 a year. We understand that there's significant community need across all of the county, and they're in some cases quite dire. And in other cases, there's groups that are looking to provide recreational programs. So it's a real spectrum. So we want to be working with our community members to create funds so that we can, it's not about we want to raise this much money, it's about we want to give away this much money. So we're going to be working with the community, and this is one of the reasons why I'm here today, because you know, we have great roots in Napanee, and we're starting to make some good headway in the north. But you know, I live here in Amherstview. Loyalist has got a lot of need. Loyalist has a lot of generous people, and my ask to you today is going to be, believe it or not for money, but can you please talk about us and tell people, because we're here to help the community. I mean, you've got a project you've got going on right now. I don't know how we can help with it, but the Henderson complex, that project you're raising funds for, maybe there's a way we can work together on that. I'm not sure, but I think it's important for us to all, you know, find ways to work together so that we can advance the community and so that we can help people that are in need in any way that we can. So that's our number one priority, is to increase our annual giving to $500,000. Our next priority is really to have more collaboration, have more conversations like the one we're having here today, to spread the word on a one-to-one basis so that we can start building out and responding to community needs. The fourth is philanthropy. We can't do this. We're a charity. We can't do this without raising funds from the community. But again, I don't like to say, hey, please give us this much money. I like to say, how can we work together so we can give away more money? And I think we can do that by all working together, raising the awareness of this organization through forums like this. And I think that's going to be very important. And the fourth and final piece, and as counselors, you well know this, strong governance makes for strong organizations. We cannot achieve our strategic directions. We cannot move towards our mission or our vision unless we have a strong model of governance. I was very fortunate when I joined the organization last summer that it's a good board. It's a great board. And we're always looking to add new people to our board as we have vacancies. So even if you have heads up for people who might be looking for a board to sit on, we have some vacancies that we're looking to fill in the coming months. So you have my contact information. So just in summary, if you can read the slide, we're here and we're all about impact. We're a charity, we're transparent, we're responsive to community needs. And really what we're attempting to do here is let people know that we're here. We're here to help the community. We're here to help students. And we're here to be responsive in the best ways that we can. And I really look forward to the potential of working with each of you. I've had the chance to meet with a few of you, and I really appreciate that. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them on.
Thank you for that presentation. Council, any questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, thank you very much for attending this evening, bringing us the information, and continuing the good work that the foundation.
Thank you. Can I leave a brochure for each of you here?
Yes. We'll make sure we get one at the end of the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Council, we have a recommendation in our agendas. Councillor Broderick.
I'll move that the delegation by Mr. Bob Barker, Executive Director, regarding Alliance Community Foundation be received.
So moved. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, any comments from the mover? Seconder? Anyone else? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Next item, draft community grant policy. The director coming forward.
I just have a very quick note at the beginning, Your Worship, if I may. So I'm pleased to present the draft community grant policy to Council for consideration. The policy combines the Renewable Energy Grant Fund policy, the Council Ad Hoc Grant Donation Request policy, the free use of facilities and discretionary funds into one single policy. It combines a variety of direction and feedback into one document, which includes the requirements of the community vibrancy and community benefit agreements entered into with the two renewable energy proponents that constructed projects within the township. The initial work undertaken by the Renewable Energy Vibrancy Fund Advisory Committee and recommendations from its subcommittees. Also direction from the Committee of the Whole on 2 occasions, most recently in March of this year with the review of the Community Grant Framework, and public consultation by way of a survey which was undertaken in March and April of this year. Based on this direction and feedback, the policy as drafted is meant to provide added clarity, to improve consistency in the way funds are distributed, to ensure appropriate recognition of the contributors, and to simplify the application and reporting requirements. And with that, the clerk and I are happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. So to start this, we have a recommendation here, but is there a motion that council wishes to bring forward so we can deal with this item? Deputy Mayor?
Through you, your worship, I move that the report from the Corporate Services Strategy and Innovation Department dated May 14th, 2024, redraft community grant policy be received, and 2, that council approve the new draft committee grant policy attached hereto as attachment 1, and as a result rescind the Renewable Energy Fund grant policy and the council ad hoc grant donations policy.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Willis. Mover, any comments or questions? Seconder? No. Okay. Any other? Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, and through the mayor. First of all, I think staff have done a very good job updating a complex policy. Though there is one area I think I would suggest we need to take another look at, and that is taking the 25% from the Kingston Solar and just using that exact same 25% in the wind electric and any future agreements. I think that's using that 25% in different agreements is problematic. And I can share why I think it's problematic.
Yeah, you can have a share.
Sure.
Yes.
Are we reconsidering something that was just decided at committee of the whole? Because that was part of the motion that was carried on March 12th.
Yes, if it goes against that motion, then it have to be a motion for reconsideration.
Okay, thank you.
So go ahead and finish your.
So yeah, I'll use an example that hopefully illustrates it. So I believe the discussion at the committee of the whole, if the policy principle was to give a greater share of the funds to the affected area. That was the idea with the 25%. So for example, if there's a future agreement, let's say a solar farm is built on the edge of Amherstfield, Taylor Kit Coronation. If you were to distribute the funds evenly across all residents, Amherstfield would expect to get approximately 50% because they're 50% of residents. But this policy as written says no, that area would only get 25%, which I think is against the principle we're trying to recognize. The principle I think we're trying to recognize is that the affected area would receive more than they otherwise should. I'll leave it at that. I have a few more comments, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. So are you? Yes. Director?
Sorry, if I may, I would just wish to clarify one thing, which is that in the report, there's a table that has 3 sections of color-coded areas. And The first area is Amherst Island only. The second area is Odessa and Wilton only. And then the third area is entire township. So just in answering what Counselor Ennis was just asking, if that scenario took place where that happened in Amherstview and there was that dedicated pot for Amherstview, Amherstview would also be entitled, once that is used up, to use the entire township pot also. And I hope that's the way the policy was read and interpreted.
Thank you. So did that clarify your question or concern?
No, I mean, I understand that. And the policy as I read it is to devote a separate pot to the affected areas. And as it's written now, it's 25%. And the principle, I believe, that underlies that is that the affected area should get more of the funds than they otherwise would, because they were there in where the project occurred. So, for example, as I read the policy, it says, you know, any future agreements, if, for example, and it's just one example, the affected area was Amherstview. There's a solar farm on the edge of Amherstview, and the affected area was defined as Amherstview. They would expect to have a if it was divvied up evenly, which would be the base, you know, they would expect 50% because they're 50% of residents. We're saying, no, the policy is give more to that affected area than they otherwise would expect. And so the pot should be larger than 50% if we were to use, you know, that policy principle. No, this policy says they only get a dedicated pot of 25%, which is less than they should expect. So it doesn't align with the principle of giving the affected area more than they would otherwise expect.
Okay. I guess that's not the intent of when the agreements were made. I was on council when both of these came through, and the intent wasn't to go by population, it was to go by affected area. And so that's when the 25% came in. But with that, so if we're looking to change what was brought forward in the committee of the whole, I'm just scrolling back to it here. So you're looking at item 4, that the policy include a minimum of 25% of renewable energy funds to go to the affected communities now in the future. Now and in the future. So you're looking to reconsider that item then? Which would require a motion for reconsideration.
Sorry,
And
through
I'll be working with the clerk to make sure that I handle it correctly.
and through the mayor. I mean, if a reconsideration is required, but I mean, that was committee of the whole. My understanding is committee of the whole's more informal, and this is, you know, when we're passing the actual bylaw. So, but I mean, I don't know. So if a reconsideration is required.
I believe in the motion for reconsiderations in order here, is it not?
Through you, your worship, yes, it is, because the committee of the whole recommendation went to the March 26th meeting where council ratified that motion or the recommendation. So you would require a reconsideration motion at this time if you want to talk about or discuss the 25% minimum.
So if we get a motion and a seconder, then we vote on it, and if there's a majority, then it comes back on the floor, is that correct? Or am I off on that?
There is already a motion on the table. And it's almost contradictory to the motion that's presented right now. So the two motions would be contradictory. So I would ask that council consider the motion that's on the table or withdraw, the mover and seconder could withdraw it, and then you could put forward a reconsideration motion, see what happens, and then go back to it if it fails.
So we'll address the motion that's on the floor, and then depending on the outcome from that, If it doesn't go through, then we can take a motion for reconsideration. Okay, thank you. Thank goodness you're here to help walk me through. Yes. Yes, Councilor Ennis, do you have
Through
a
the mayor.
clarification question?
Just one way I could suggest a friendly amendment. To the motion if, or we can just talk about them. I mean, I guess I can still. I'd like to suggest a friendly, it's up.
Is that in order without a reconsideration? Your mic is on.
To council, given that I've heard opposing views, I don't think it's appropriate for a friendly amendment to take place at this time. You could, so there's a motion on the floor right now. You could propose an amendment to that main motion. So Councilor Ennis could propose an amendment to the main motion at this time and then have a seconder vote on it and then work our way backwards.
Do you wish to make a formal amendment then? Okay, please proceed.
Sorry, am I amending the current motion?
So
Sorry.
you would be amending the motion on the floor and what portion you wish to amend?
Yeah, so to amend recommendation 2, to instead say that council directs staff to report back on options or to report back on an updated options for an updated draft community grant policy, which aligns with the Kingston Solar agreement. And with, yeah, which aligns with.
So moved? Is that motion clear to staff? Is it action? I'll call. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Budrick, you second? Seconded. There's discussion on amendments? Yes. So, over?
Yeah, I simply just think it requires a little bit more study. I think what we know is the Kingston Solar Agreement, right? And then we took the 25% that's in there and then use that for the wind electric and then any future agreements. But upon a careful read of the Kingston Solar Agreement, and understanding that the principle I think we're trying to get at is that the affected areas for any of these future projects receive more than they otherwise should. And so, for example, in the Kingston Solar Agreement, there's the affected area is identified. It's about rough estimate is it's about 20% of the population, and the township and the proponent at the time could have said just divvy it out evenly amongst all residents. They said no, we want to provide more to the affected area, and so in that case they said 25%. But I think it requires further study to ensure that we're making it fair for wind electric and for all the future agreements. I don't think we can just take the 25 and run with it in all other agreements, because, for example, I would need to understand why, if there was a future project in Amherst's affected area, why would they get less, significantly less as a dedicated pot than they otherwise would. And that's why I'm just asking staff to do a little bit further study on that question and come back to us with it.
Okay. Seconder, comments?
Yes, I kind of agree with Councilor Ennis and on the simple fact that there are areas that will be coming, and our rural areas will be affected, I believe, more than his example, just because I know, just because the geography that it would take, say, for a solar farm, it would take many hundreds of acres, and those areas should be looked after in the whole idea behind it, that they will be affected just like the Kingston Solar project was and the wind electric on Amherst Island.
Other council members, any questions for clarification or comments? Councillor Prodrick.
Through your worship, just a couple of comments more than anything. I think it's on page 8 of the report. And I'm going to use example of green, blue, and yellow. If you look at where the money is actually being spent, we have one area where there was no grant requests from 22, 23, or 24. Now, is my understanding that at least on the capital side there, that each one of those years, they may have got 25%. I guess what I'm getting at, if area A gets 25%, never uses it in a year, does it carry over to the next year? So is area A building a pot for maybe a bigger project down the road?
Through your worship, yes. So the totals at the top of the columns that are green and blue in the report are the total amount allocated over the full first 5 years of the agreements.
And if I could follow on that. So, and I think it's clear to me anyways, that entire township portion is open to anybody. And the 25% is sort of a placeholder for any area that doesn't have a project. And in terms of area and populations, so on, we also have to remember that it's not in a sense like previous discussions where we worried about, providing something for individuals. We're looking at the big picture here. And areas may benefit even though they're not part of maybe the solar farm, or maybe we're building a manure farm or whatever it may be. And for me, I think this is fairly clear, and staff have done a job to get it here. And I don't see a point in going back. I think we had our discussion at the whole, and I'll leave it at that.
Other councillors, questions, comments? Okay, I just have a question for clarification to the mover. So this amendment would then, if proceeds, would base that funding for the impacted area on population? Is that what you're looking at then, using Amherst as the example? Yes.
Through the mayor, no, just that I think when you start using percentages, we get into, I like numbers, and we use percentages, we get into trouble. And I'm using the example of the Amherst example, just to illustrate the mathematical point that the point we're trying to get at is to give the affected area more money than they otherwise should expect. If we leave it at the 25% for wind electric at a future, we're not doing that. But I think what we want is a factor. So you say the affected area gets 1.5 or 2 times or whatever staff options they may come up with. There's a factor, and then that translates equally across future projects. Whereas this percentage, using, for example, the Amherst example, it doesn't translate. And I don't think it aligns with the policy point council was trying to get at, which was give the affected area more than they otherwise should, because otherwise at the committee of the whole, we would have gone with the recommendation staff made, and staff made the recommendation to just put it all in one pot. And that's it. It's all in one pot and we go forward. So, and just to be on the record, I actually, on sober second thought, just to say to staff, I actually can understand that view as well too, to just put it all in one pot, and go from there. But that's maybe a whole other issue. Council said, I think the policy point at the committee of the whole was to give the affected area more funds than they otherwise would get. And to give, I would say, to give staff a second chance to provide some options on this policy. It's a complex policy that's alternative to just taking the 25% from the Kingston Solar. There's no issue with the Kingston Solar. That was 25% as indicated in the contract. It's the taking that and taking it to other projects in other areas that introduces some complexity and difficulty. And it's simply an opportunity for staff to come back to us with an analysis of that.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Willis.
Just for clarification through the chair to Councilor Ernest, when you're speaking of a factor, what would that multiply by?
I mean, if this goes forward, that's the question, right? Like, what's the factor that we use in future agreements? For example, the Kingston Solar factor is, based on rough estimates from staff, is something like 1.5 times the affected area. So he said, instead of them getting $1, they get $1.50 that they otherwise would. That's the factor in that case, but I'm willing to entertain other options. It's just, if we wanted to align with the Kingston Solar, you would have to use that factor. If we don't want to align with the Kingston Solar in wind electric or future agreements, it would be a different factor. And that could be presented by staff in their options that they.
Counselor Willis.
Sorry, in that example, when you said 1.5, were you multiplying it by the population of the affected area to get to that dollar value?
There's in there. Sort of like the Kingston Solar agreement, if it outlines what the affected area is, right? And the population is approximately 19%. So if you took the money and our policy was just divvy it up evenly throughout the township, which would be in line with what staff perhaps proposed, that it goes into one pot and it gets divvied up how council sees appropriate. No, the Kingston Solar said we'll give more than what would otherwise be expected to that area. And so then you get a factor of how much more. It's just whether, the 25% or a factor, but I mean, I put it back to Councillor Willis as a question, like, is our policy position that the affected area gets more money than they would otherwise expect or less? Because if it's more, then how can we have a 25% policy for future agreements? If, for example, the affected area is deemed to be Amherst View, and they're like 50% of the population, they would get less than they otherwise would expect.
Counselor Willis, any further questions or comments?
I do just have a concern about it because this policy is 6 years old now, and the fundamental part of the policy did have a 25% calculation in it, and a lot of time and energy and work has been done to bring forward a policy that we could all agree on, had some semblance of fairness. And we're going to hold up the entire process of the next intake if we reopen it completely. I also am concerned because one of the projects you're talking about happened in an area that only has 400 people. And I'm concerned that what you're suggesting is that they should get less in dollars because of the small population, even though the impact was wholly felt in that area. So I'm just not quite sure where we're going with it.
Counselor Broderick, do you have a question for clarification?
More of a statement on the policy, I guess, in our committee of the whole.
We're only dealing with the amendment right now,
Okay.
not the overall policy, just
All right.
for clarification.
Save it.
Okay. Any other comments on the amendment only? And just before we go back for final comment, I just want to clarify one statement that I heard was about the amount of funds that in guaranteeing there are additional funds for the affected area. At the time that they were written, it was actually to provide guaranteed funds and not necessarily more. It's just that there was the most affected area would be guaranteed 25%. And then the rest of the pot was open to the entire township, including the affected area. So they could end up with more, or they would have ended up just the 25 if that's all they requested. So that was my comment, and I'll go back for final comment from the mover.
Through the mayor, thank you. A- And I think we're just talking about how to, I think we're agreeing on the policy point that there should be a guaranteed amount for the affected area, that is perhaps more than they would otherwise expect. And I think it's just more about in the details of how that's implemented fairly in the policy going forward. I think the other thing that's helpful here is that, to Councillor Willis's point, is that we've removed the maximum, right? So previously there was a maximum, and now, yes, we're just talking about, there's a guaranteed pot for the affected area, and then there's no maximums, that area can go back to the fund as much as they want. So I think that's a key point. We've removed the maximum. That helps with fairness as well. I think it's just, Councillor Willis brought the 25%, out of the blue to me at a committee of the whole. It's very difficult to process that in one meeting. Now that I've had sober second thought, I'm just proposing that staff take one more look at it. So I think how it's currently, we're just on that point. I think it's a very well done policy otherwise. To have another look at how to best translate the Kingston Solar across into the wind electric in the future, but still remaining the principle that yes, there's a guaranteed for the affected area and that there's no maximum. And it's just really about how to best divvy up the guaranteed amount. That makes sense mathematically kind of in the wind electric and in any future agreements.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to call a question. This is a question on the amendment only.
Sorry.
Yes,
Up through there. Can I ask for a recorded vote?
yes, we'll request a recorded vote, and I'll turn to the clerk for that, and I'll just clarify that it's for the amendment only and not on the recommendation.
Through you, your worship, as per section 12.11 of the procedure bylaw, Councillor Ennis requested a recorded vote on the amending motion. So I will call out the names of each councillor in alphabetical order, starting with Councillor Ennis, and then each councillor, please state if you're in favor or opposed to the motion. Councillor Ennis,
4.
Councillor Parks, 4. Councillor Podrick, Councillor Willis, Deputy Mayor,
Against.
Councillor Buderick, Mr. Mayor.
Against.
Mr. Mayor, that motion fails 4-3.
So we're back to the original recommendation, and the mover spoke, the seconder spoke, and we were on the floor. So I'll open it back up to the floor for comments or questions on the recommendation that was presented. Any questions or comments? Councillor Broderick?
Okay, I hope this is in order, but so the recommendation is presented by staff. If I go just down below that, the fourth point under our last committee, the whole meeting, was that the policy include, and I'm going to say minimum in capital letters, of 25% renewable energy funds go to the affected communities now and in the future. And I guess my question with that is, if 25% is the ceiling, to go above that ceiling, is that through the committee and then it comes to council? Like, I'm just curious about that, in the sense that that's the way I read it. The minimum is 25, it doesn't say you can't get 50 or whatever down the road.
And I'll look to the director.
So through your worship, yes, the dedicated amount would be held in a separate area. And then after that, all funds would go into one pot. And how that is distributed would be completely dependent on who submit, or what organizations or individuals, what organizations submit an application and which organizations are approved by the committee and then council.
Counselor Willis.
Just looking at the table on page 8, and throughout the report, we go back and forth between the first 5 years and 25%, which we know are essentially the same thing because these are 20-year agreements at this point. But that table suggests that there's a deficit in the entire township portion. And that's because the top line is the first 5 years of each of the agreements. Am I correct? Versus 25%. Sorry. Versus 25% of what we've actually been paid. Because I'm just thinking if this table showed 25% of what we've been paid versus the full first 5 years, then there would be less in the Amherst Island portion, more in the entire township portion, if I'm not incorrect there.
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Any other questions or comments from council? Go back to the mover for final comment, Deputy Mayor. No final comment. Call the question. All in favor, please raise a hand. Opposed, sorry, I'll put my hand up. Opposed. Motion is passed. Next item is National Accessibility Week, May 26th to June 1st, 2024. Change of staff. Is there any additional information at this time or just available for questions?
No, we're just here for questions.
Thank you. So council, we have a recommendation with the report. Would someone like to put a motion on the floor so we can address this? Councilor Prader.
I would move, your worship, that the report from the Corporate Services Strategy Innovation Department dated May 14th, 2024, National Accessibility Week be received, and that council proclaim May 26th to June 1st, 2024 as National Accessibility Week throughout the township.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Parks. Mover, any comments?
I would just do a personal aside that our family is going through some issues with one of our family members, and I can really now maybe have a little more appreciation of some of the struggles that people with mobility and access issues have.
Great. Seconder, any comments? Anyone else? Being none, call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. 2023-2024 MTO Provincial Gas Tax Agreement. Director? Do you have any additional information at this time or just here for questions?
No, nothing further at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you. Council? Do we have a motion to put forward for this item so we can put it on the floor? Councilor Willis.
I move that the report from the Finance Department dated May 14th, 2024, read 2023-2024 provincial gas tax be received, and that bylaw 2024-58, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and treasurer to execute a letter of agreement between the province of Ontario and the Corporation of Loyalist Township related to funding provided under the dedicated gas tax funds for public transportation program 2023-2024 be enacted and passed.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Budrick. So seconded. Mover, any comments? Seconder? Anyone else? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Results of tender 2024-16. New faces coming forward. Welcome. Standard question, anything to add to this report or just here for questions?
Yes, so through you, Your Worship, I do have something to add. So since writing this report, there's been an update on the developers agreement that's noted within. So as per the February 27th council meeting, that agreement's intended to formalize the contracting, the scope of work by the township on behalf of the developers and identifies the cash flows that will be received from the developers. Unfortunately, there's been a delay in getting this agreement signed and some challenges faced in those negotiations. So in discussing with our legal counsel, we've determined that if the developers are unwilling to sign the agreement, we would still recommend proceeding with executing the construction tender agreement. So the developer's cost for their scope of work would be covered by existing securities that the township has in hand from the various subdivision agreements we have with the two developers in question. And again, staff in reviewing with our legal counsel are comfortable recommending to proceed with or without the signed developer agreement.
Okay, so the recommendation stands as it is then. It's just some of the afterworks, maybe a little different.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, council, so we have the recommendation before us. Would someone like to put it on the floor? Deputy Mayor.
Through your worship, I move that the report from the Engineering and Environment Division, May 14th, 2024, results of tender 2024-16 Potter Creighton South Main reconstruction be received. 2, that council authorize the mayor and CAO to enter into an agreement with K. Mulrooney Trucking Limited for the award of tender 2024-16 Potter Creighton South Main reconstruction. 3, that council authorize a transfer of general rate funds from CC 170025 to CC 170023 in the amount of $20,000 to cover the Babcock Mill Park Reading Garden budget shortfall. And 4, that council authorize the additional cost of $220,000 be funded from the Canada Community Building Fund.
So moved. Seconded by Councillor Ennis. Any comments from the mover? Seconder? Anyone else? Councillor Broderick.
Sorry, I can't let this one go. Just for future, I don't like the term low bidder. Could we say preferred bidder? Just a little English nerd I am, sorry.
Point taken. Councillor Willis.
I'm looking at the 3 bids, and there's a $2.3 million spread between the preferred bidder and the highest bid. Can you help me understand what the differences were between those 2 bids? What I'm asking is, do we have a fear that this lowest bidder is going to come back needing more money through this project and we're going to be adding to it? Because I just can't fathom how 3 companies could be so far apart from each other on essentially the same job as it was spec'd.
Through your worship. It's difficult to speak to what the various contractors bid. The pricing that we received is fairly close to what we had estimated the cost for the work to be, and does compare to other projects we've tendered. So I track all my bid prices and whatnot. So the preferred bidder's price is what we were expecting to see. The next highest bidder was closer, and then the third one was a bit more higher. So with the closer bid, I think that's more realistic of where the bid should have been, and the third one was a bit of an outlier.
With the preferred bidder, do we have experience with this company, and have they come in on budget based on their initial bids in the past, or have they come back needing more money for their projects?
Sorry, through you, your worship. Yes, they've done a number of projects since I've been the project supervisor at the township. They did the Edgewood water main work, and they're currently doing the existing Odessa West project on Bridge Street. There's some of the typical things that weren't identified in the contract, but nothing that's been overly extraneous or anything like that.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Back to the mover for final comment. Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Loyalist East, Phase 9. Plan of subdivision assumption of a 1-foot reserve. Welcome, Director. Any additional information at this time? None? Council, we have, sorry, oh no, I did open it up. We have the report with the recommendation before us. Could someone put a motion on the floor? Councillor Broderick.
Your worship, I would recommend that the report from the Development Services Division dated May 14th, 2024, Loyalist Estates Phase 9, assumption of a 1-foot reserve be received, and that bylaw 2024-56 being a bylaw to assume a 1-foot reserve described as block 37 on 29M-58 be enacted and passed.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Counselor Ennis, any comments from the mover? Seconder? Anyone else? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thank you. Seniors Association Kingston Region Operational Agreement. Welcome, Director. Standard question, any additional information at this time?
Not at this time, Your Worship.
Not at this time. So council, we have the recommendation before us. Deputy Mayor.
I move that the report from the Community and Customer Services Department, Recreation and Facilities Division dated May 14th, 2024, Seniors Association Kingston Region operational agreement be received. 2, council directs staff to enter into an operational agreement with Seniors Association Kingston Region to provide additional programming and services for resident seniors, complementing existing programming. 3, bylaw 2024-43 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and chief administrative officer to execute the agreement be enacted and passed.
So moved, seconded by Councillor Parks. Comments from the mover?
Only that this is a great thing. Some of us had the opportunity of being at what was a very interesting announcement with the minister and his very talented saxophone playing. But no, in all seriousness, this is a great thing for our community, and I'm happy to see it come through.
Thank you. Seconder, any comments? Anyone else? Councillor Willis.
Through your worship, on page 2 of the report, it lists the communities where the program is being provided, and it says growth to Amherst Island will be considered when feasible. What's required to make that feasible? Is it funding or spaced?
I believe it's space.
Councillor Pradrick.
I'm disappointed that I missed the minister's presentation, but on a serious note, I think working with community groups is the way to go, given our aging demographics here and locating in different areas of the community. And again, working with the Seniors Association through the funding is key to more programming that maybe we might not be able to provide on our own.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, back to the mover. Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. And transfer from ferry berthage fees to reserve fund. Do we have council member that wishes to put the recommendation or motion on the floor? Councillor Willis.
Move the report that the report from the Community and Customer Services Department Transportation Division dated May 14th, 2024, retransfer from ferry berthage fees reserve fund be received, and that council authorize a transfer in the amount of $66,217 from the ferry berthage fees reserve fund as compensation for the direct expenses incurred for the ferry dock fender modification.
So moved. Do we have a second? Councillor Pradrick. Any comments? Mover? Yes, questions or comments, sir?
Through the chair. I've heard the term ferry berthage fee reserve fund before, but could you explain what that money is and how it's to be used?
Through you, Your Worship, in 1998, the docks were transferred from the federal government to the municipality. At that time, for the next roughly 10 years, there was a berthage fee that was charged to the province for the use of those docks. In 2008, roughly, I believe, 2009. The province wanted to purchase those docks back. So the land transfer occurred, and all of the funds that had been collected in that time have remained in that reserve. They are to be spent on dock modifications. In my time, anytime that any money has been transferred from that, it's been through council resolution. And we have to have approval from MTO Legal and council resolution in order to utilize those funds.
Seconder, any comments? Other comments or questions? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. We have the motion regarding the request to resume Municipal Property Assessment Corporation assessment cycle, and I believe the clerk is bringing something up on the screen for a quick correction.
Through you, your worship, I'd just like to indicate a correction that needs to be made to the motion that's presented on the agenda. So instead of the federal Minister of Finance, it is more appropriate to direct this resolution to the Ontario Minister of Finance. So I've just made that correction for you.
Thank you. So with that, I could have a council member move it, and since it's so long, maybe we could move the motion that was presented on the screen.
I would move the motion as presented on the screen.
I don't mind reading it, but I would move it.
If you want to read it, go for it. Okay. So moved, seconded by Councillor Proderick. Mover, any comments? Seconder? Anyone else? Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. And now we have a motion to move into Committee of the Whole. There's a recommendation then before us. Could someone put the motion on the floor? Councillor Willis. Yeah.
Just a minute.
Yes.
I move that council now resolve into committee of the whole.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Parks. All in favor? Motion is passed. And we will just take a few minutes to
Okay, I call this Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 7:19. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Items for consideration, 13.3.1 Blue Box transition, non-eligible sources. Madam Clerk, would you like the motion moved?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think Alex has a presentation that he would like to provide before
First.
discussion.
Yeah. So I'll turn it over to our former Public Works Manager, who's still moonlighting in that capacity.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Prior to me turning this over to Alex to do the presentation, I just wanted to thank him for continuing with the role transitions. He has helped us with some continuity in this role, and he's agreed to do the presentation for us as well. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our new Public Works Manager who was with us tonight, Gagan Sandhu, who's at the back of the room. And we have, welcome. And we have also been able to fill our Public Works Technical Supervisor position. And that's Tom Burton. And he was an internal. He was one of our techs. And he is in the room tonight. So I just wanted to introduce them to you and to thank Alex. And I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you. And before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the work that Ed Adams had done as well. Ed is a former manager of Public Works here at the township. Been retired for several years, but he has certainly helped me out in the 5 years I was manager on a number of different occasions, and he was instrumental in pulling a lot of this information together for council. So the purpose of this presentation is to bring council up to date on the Blue Box program's transition to producer responsibility and the impact on non-eligible sources. It is a follow-up to the February 27th transition to producer responsibility presentation that I previously provided. A quick recap on what is producer responsibility. Under a producer responsibility system, companies that make and import products are responsible for their waste. And Ontario is transitioning from a shared industry responsibility to one of full producer responsibility. Producers include the brand holders, importers, or retailers of products that contain Blue Box materials, including grocery, retail, and fast food packaging. And the Blue Box legislation allows for more than one organization to represent the producers of paper and packaging materials. And these organizations are called Producer Responsibility Organizations, or PRO. And Circular Materials Ontario, or CMO, has been designated as the primary PRO representing a large number of producers. Municipalities currently collect recyclable materials from the same sources as residential garbage. However, the 50% funding currently received from RIPRA to support recycling operations does not include costs for industrial, commercial, and institutional, even if delivered through a municipal program such as our current program. Under the new regulations, schools, retirement, and long-term care homes, as well as specific or specified public spaces, will be eligible for collection. Non-eligible sources would include industrial and commercial properties, not-for-profit organizations, community facilities, daycares, places of worship, campgrounds, and trailer parks without permanent or seasonal households, and materials related to farming operations. Loyalist has chosen to opt out of remaining involved with the collection of eligible materials. As such, the PRO will be fully responsible for the recycling collection of eligible sources on July 1st, 2025. And during the 6-month transition period, Loyalist could, at its cost, request that the PRO continue to collect from non-eligible sources currently receiving municipal collection services. An agreement would need to be made with the PRO prior to them executing their contract, which is expected shortly. However, post-transition, the municipality would be fully responsible for the continuation of any non-eligible depot or curbside collection services. Post-transition, the commingling of eligible and non-eligible sources will not be permitted. Some properties may have both eligible and non-eligible, such as mixed-use properties or commercial properties, or even farm properties that have a residential house and a commercial business. Non-eligible materials must be separated from the residential collection and serviced in an alternative way starting in 2026. Under the new provincial legislation, the commingling. Next slide. Sorry, it didn't go. Okay. Under the new provincial legislation, the commingling of Blue Box materials from eligible and non-eligible sources will not be permitted. Communities must decide on whether to continue serving non-eligible sources, and doing so will need to, and those doing so will need to arrange for separate collection, hauling, and processing contracts. Some of the advantages for continuing the service would include maintaining a service similar to the existing service, continued participation in the recycling program, and less likely that blue box material would ultimately end up in the garbage. Advantages to terminating there would be no requirement for the community to provide service to non-eligibles. It avoids increasing costs and no need for the township to consider invoicing or user fees for the cost of the service. Disadvantages for continuing this service would include potentially higher costs per stop due to loss of economies of scale from the residential system, increased depot costs with the rental of separate collection bins, potential challenges with securing a processor who can keep materials separate from the common collection system, and added staff time to administer the non-eligible program. Disadvantages to terminating the service would be that it does not maintain service delivery for some small businesses and could leave non-eligible sources without an option, less likelihood of continued participation in the recycling program, and a chance the materials the material ends up in the garbage. There is a need to notify the small businesses that the existing service is being discontinued, and there would be a temporary increase in complaints from the end of this service. Non-eligible sources losing this service may complain as they pay for this service as part of their property taxes. So the following information has been provided from various municipalities through the Continuous Improvement Fund, or CIF. And the first few examples are for curbside collection. So the city of Aurelia had a 2-year transition from January 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2026. They decided to opt in during the transition period, and the city plans to continue the non-eligible service until the end of their existing service contract in June 2028, at which point they will decide on whether to continue with non-eligible collection after that time. Cornwall has a 1-year transition period starting in January 2025 and has opted out. Still a work in progress, but they are considering hiring a collection contractor to continue collecting non-eligible materials after their transition date. And they will also need to arrange for the processing of non-eligible materials with a private facility. The County of Norfolk transitions in September 2024 and have chosen to opt out. And they plan to continue collecting non-eligibles during the transition period while advocating for a policy change, much like Loyalist Council has already done. They do not plan on continuing the service post-2026. Carleton Place has opted out and transitioned on July 1st, 2023, and they chose not to continue collection of non-eligible sources. Letters were sent to businesses 5 months prior to their transition. There was an increase in calls and complaints for the first 2 weeks, but issues seem to have been resolved quickly. And there are several local companies that non-eligible sources can make private arrangements with for recycling collection. For municipal facilities, an RFP was tendered to set up a single stream recycling at 4 locations. Other locations within Carleton Place bring their materials to those 4 locations, and bins are locked to prevent others from accessing them. Carleton Place has indicated that they are satisfied with their decision to terminate collection. Several other communities have opted out. Some common communication planning strategies included directing non-eligibles to arrange collection and processing with private waste providers, sending letters to all the affected properties, posting general announcements, and hosting a public information session where non-eligible sources could come out and seek more information. A few examples for depot services as well. So Mississippi Mills opted out of both their convenience depots and curbside collection. They transitioned on July 1st, 2023. And during transition, they arranged for an external contractor to collect curbside materials from non-eligible sources. They have chosen to operate 2 convenience depots for eligible and non-eligible sources with separate bins provided at the depot. They are currently in the process of conducting a waste management planning study to determine post-transition options. Blue Mountain transitioned in October 2023, and they opted in at depots and opted out at curbside. They established a separate non-eligible curbside collection and processing contract with their current waste service. And the contract change resulted in significant cost increases. No decision has been made on the post-transition level of service. Marathon transitions on July 1st, 2024, and has opted in at depots and opted out at curbside. And they plan on setting up separate bins at their depot for non-eligible sources. However, their plans are not finalized and are still working on procuring hauling and processing capacity. So in Loyalist, slide please. In Loyalist Township, there are approximately 16 non-eligible sources currently identified, including banks, post offices, and some small businesses, which are receiving curbside collection services, along with 6 municipal facilities that are also currently receiving Blue Box curbside collection under our existing contract. The township does not collect from larger commercial sources, and the number of businesses utilizing the Island Depot is unknown as material is commingled and Violet does not accept Blue Box materials. There are approximately 200 township non-eligible institutional, commercial, and industrial sources according to MPAC, and another 250 farm properties with at least one non-residential building on their property. The number of home occupations commingling their non-eligible business recycling with their residential recycling is unknown. Somebody off my last page. There it is. Yeah. Staff are recommending that Loyalist Township discontinue the collection of non-eligible source Blue Box materials effective July 1st, 2025, and that businesses be notified a minimum of 6 months in advance that the service is being discontinued, and that they may find an alternative collection service by that date. Alternatives would be to provide continue providing curbside and or depot collection services with funding through either taxation or user fees. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. I'll turn it over to the committee. Questions on the presentation? Councillor Willis.
Just trying to understand the finances of it. So what do we pay right now for Blue Box collection?
I believe it's approximately $500,000 a year for collection.
And that includes curbside and the depots that are at the landfills?
Yeah.
And so we won't be paying that $500,000 in the future?
That's correct. Now of that, we get approximately half of that funded back to us through RIPRA currently. So we would be saving half of that, 250,000.
Okay. And what would it cost if we were picking up the non-eligibles and collecting them at the depots?
So we don't know right now. We would have to go out to tender to determine what that cost would be. What we're hearing from other municipalities in Ontario is they're seeing significant increases in their collection costs for non-eligibles. What's happened is the municipal stream is moving to the private sector. So it's reduced the amount of capacity available for processing of recyclable materials. We currently send all our materials to Kingston Area Recycling Corporation. It's owned by the city of Kingston, and then they sell the materials on our behalf and we get some revenue. Under the new system, that's going to go to Waste Management in Kingston, and they will process the materials for the residential garbage. They cannot, my understanding is they cannot take non-eligibles unless they create a separate process for it. They can't commingle even at the facility that's sorting. So then that leaves everybody else or a separate waste management stream to take that. So everybody is now competing for that same space. So we're seeing increases in cost to provide that same service. In addition to that, we would be providing a collection service for 200 to 400 properties versus 8,600 right now. So it would be a much smaller contract. So your economies of scale just aren't there.
Continue.
So the unknown. We have the option of asking Pro or whoever they are to pick up our non-eligibles?
We have the option for 6 months to do so.
And then we don't.
And after that, we would be fully responsible for a new system.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Counselor Broderick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Scott. So basically, to pick up non-eligibles, that would be I guess, a third route, because we'd have our garbage, and then we'd have our eligible route, and then we'd have a non-eligible, if we went that way.
That would be correct. It would have to be separate vehicles, separate contract from what the pro would be using.
Okay, and I guess, given that it's a provincial directive, my only concern in a sense is that we're on board, and I think you are, with notifying businesses and anybody else. I think that's going to be the important part. And obviously householders are going to be affected. There may be some things that we were putting in before. But I'm guessing the long-term effect is our violet dump sites' lifespan may decrease.
It's definitely my concern. On the recycling side of things, I did have a discussion with the city of Kingston waste management supervisors, and they feel that the provincial legislation picks up almost 100% of what we're currently picking up and may pick up a little bit extra. They may be a little stricter in their collection. We don't know. It'll be completely out of our hands as far as how they intend to collect. And the second part of your question.
It was more about the life cycle of violet dump, for example.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, it's something that's been near and dear to my heart for quite some time, as to extending and maximizing the life of those, both our two landfills. And we want to make sure that both are through our new solid waste collection contracts, and any recycling contracts we put in place that bring material, that we're eliminating as much material as possible from those landfills. So.
Further questions? No? We do have a recommendation before us. I would request somebody to move the recommendation, or an alternative to get us on the floor. Councilor Broderick.
I would move that the report from the Community and Customer Services Department of Public Works Division dated May 14th, 2024, Blue Box transition non-eligible sources be received, and that Loyalist Township discontinue the collection of non-eligible source Blue Box materials effective July 1st, 2025, and that all non-eligible sources of Blue Box materials currently being collected under the existing Blue Box recycling program be notified a minimum of 6 months in advance, i.e. January 1, 2025, that the service is being discontinued and that they must find alternative collection services by the effective date.
So moved. Can I get a seconder? Councilor Willis. Mover. Seconder.
It doesn't sound like we have a lot of choices, and I just hope that we can support those non-eligible people in finding what their alternative is.
Anyone else? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I guess the one thing I'd like to note is that the township has passed motions already requesting that the province reconsider the non-eligible and the pickup of the non-eligible locations. And I believe that really our next steps are, we need to continue down that path of encouraging the province to reconsider, so that especially places like not-for-profits and you know, the daycares and places like that, the ones that run on very tight budgets, that this could impact them significantly, and that we continue to work with the province to try and include them in the eligible. And just a note that, for that matter, when the notices go out, they're also very capable of contacting the province themselves and making sure that they're aware of the hardship that may be incurred, if there is hardship to be incurred.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any further comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Can I get a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole? Counselor Broderick? Can I get a seconder? Counselor Innes? All those in favor? Motion is carried. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Deputy. We'll reconvene the council meeting now at this time. The next item up is notices of motion and direct motions. Are there any notices of motion to be presented this evening by council? Seeing none, are there any direct motions to be received this evening from council? None. We have the consent agenda. Any item within the consent agenda can be extracted. Yes, Councilor Wilson, are you waiting to make a motion? Okay, I was just going to do a little preamble that any item within the consent agenda can be extracted by any council member if they wish to deal with it individually. Otherwise, the motion can be taken for all. So, Councilor Willis.
To extract item 15.3.
15.3, the minutes, okay. We'll extract that. Are there any other items to be extracted this evening? Being none, entertain a motion for the remainder of the items then. And the recommendation is with the in the agenda. Deputy Mayor.
Through you, your worship, I move that all items in the consent agenda, save for 15.3, dated May 14th, 2024, be approved as presented and that the necessary action be taken.
Thank you. So moved. Seconded by Councilor Broderick. Any comments from the mover? Seconder? Anyone else? Being none, call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. Now I will turn back to Councilor Willis with the extracted item.
Through your worship to staff. In the minutes under fundraising strategy, there's an item that says the committee requested that staff bring a recommendation to council to investigate hiring a fundraising coordinator. And then in an email to the committee, it was mentioned that that was coming to council today. So is the intention, if we approve those minutes, that we've approved that hiring?
Willis, council is not being asked to approve the minutes of the committee. The committee would approve the minutes. What council is being asked right now is to approve the resources to direct staff to investigate hiring a professional fundraiser. So it's because the committee doesn't have its own budget or staff resources allocated to it, you as council assign all duties that the committee recommends. So that's why it's being presented to you, but you're not necessarily approving the minutes of the committee right now.
So with that, do you have a motion you wish to put forward?
Yes. I move that the minutes of the May 7th, 2024 W.J. Henderson Recreation Center Renewal Fundraising Committee be adopted and circulated, and Resolution WJ 2024-4, that the committee recommend council direct staff to investigate hiring of a professional fundraiser.
Moved, seconded by Councilor Broderick. Any comments from the mover? Seconder? Anyone else? Call the question. All in favor? Motion opposed? Motion is passed. Announcements. Any announcements from council this evening? Councilor Broderick.
I would just like to thank the organizers of the staff golf tournament. I had the pleasure of playing with the mayor and the deputy, and such levels of golf I have never seen in my life.
I'm sure. Counselor Parks.
Thank you, your worship. I just have two. One, I just wanted to thank the residents that came out to do the Earth Day in the bath. There was a lot of garbage collected and it's being taken off the streets, which was lovely to do. I was able to participate this year, which was nice. Also received just a letter of thanks from the hospitality club in the Village of Bath. They were one of the grant receivers recently in the first intake, so they just wanted to acknowledge that to council.
Thank you. Any other announcements this evening? Seeing none, excuse me. I have one. I wanted to recognize Andres Switzer. He's our aquatics coordinator, and he received the Emerging Leader Award from the Parks and Recreation Ontario Annual Conference. So this organization recognizes and honors individuals and organizations by highlighting outstanding innovations, achievements that contribute to the advancement of the parks and the recreation sector. The Emerging Leader Award recognizes the outstanding achievements and accomplishments of a professional in the early stages of their career as a leader, instructor, coordinator, supervisor, administrator, consultant, or any combination of these within their field. Andreas was recognized for his contributions to the sector, but more importantly, for his contribution and commitment to Loyalist Township community, to his team, and to the organization. So we just want to thank Andres for his hard work, his dedication, and congratulate him in receiving this provincial award. So just want to congratulate him. With that, we're to the confirmatory bylaw. Do we have a mover for the confirmatory bylaw? Deputy Mayor?
I move that bylaw 2024-59 to confirm the proceedings of Council of Loyalist Township be enacted and passed, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and seal.
So moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Parks. Call the question. All in favor? Motion is passed. And we would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Budrek. So moved? Yes. After the meeting? That's what open forum was for. If that, we're just at the end now, so. So adjournment moved by Councillor Budrek, seconded by Councillor Prodrick. All in favor? Motion is passed. We are adjourned at 7:48.